All right, so in this video, I want to get a little bit vulnerable with you, and I want to kind of talk about some of the dark periods of my life. And the reason why I want to share these stories is because I want to hopefully put you in a position where you avoid some of the negative things that I went through while also achieving the positives that I got as a result of these negative experiences. So in this video, what I want to share with you is how I completely turned my life around. Now, I want to start by giving you a framework of how to change your life in less than 60 days. The steps I'm going to share with you in this video are based on over 10 years of personal experience and trial and error. And my prediction is that life will get more difficult, just as what comes up must come down. My prediction is that life as a whole, for everybody, is going to get a bit more difficult. Whatever comes up must come down. I feel like you've heard that expression before. I feel like this is just true in life, in physics, in the universe, in whatever as a whole. So, with that being said, if you've been going through an era of easy times, good times, and I think for pretty much everyone, at least if you're living in the US, that has been the case. I think those good times, to a degree, are ultimately going to come to an end. And I do think that difficult times will follow. I do think that difficult times will follow that. And so I want to prepare you by giving you sort of these principles and sort of these experiences that I had. So that way, when the difficult times do come, you won't get left behind. You won't be in a in a position that's disadvantageous. So you can see over here on the side, this is kind of like the way I like to visualize the idea of preparing yourself for the future. As you can see over here on the right hand side of the screen, there's two people. There's mediocre Mike and there's successful Sam. Mediocre Mike is sort of the representation of most people in the modern era when they go through these easy times and they don't have enough difficult times to kind of balance everything out. So, mediocre Mike, he's the average man in modern society. He's fat, he's blissfully ignorant, and he's governed by his emotions, the government, or society as a whole. And pretty much what I mean by this is he kind of just listens to the things that just pop up. If the government tells him to do something, he automatically believes it to be true and he does not question it. If his emotions tell him to do something, he just gives in and listens to it. If he feels a little bit hungry, he just gives in and eats. If he feels a little bit uncomfortable, he doesn't bother engaging in whatever activity or whatever thing that he logically understands could be beneficial for him. He doesn't do that. He listens to his emotions and is governed by that instead. He's governed by society. If the majority of people say something is true, he believes that they must all be correct because they're the majority, even though in reality, this is not the case. This is usually not the case. He lacks purpose and control of his life because he's governed by everything and everyone around him. But because his life is so easy, he has no reason to change. And I want to say, sort of as a side tangent, most people are mediocre, Mike. Most people have no real reason to change when things are easy. And I think the reason for that is because as humans, we sort of take the path of least resistance. We sort of take the easy road most of the time. Most of us do this at least. Not all of us, but most of us. And so when there's no real reason to change, when there's no real reason to go down the difficult path, you won't. Why would you? You're watching this right now. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, if I could go the easy path, if I can take a shortcut, why would I ever go the hard route? And you're going to kind of see why as this video progresses. But just as a kind of spoiler to what's going to come up in this video, you want to take the difficult path, not all the time, but a lot of the time, because there's lots of lessons that you learn by doing things the hard way. And when you do things the hard way, everything else in relation is suddenly easy anyway. So if you're always going down the easy path, when things do get difficult, you're not prepared. If you go down the difficult path, when everything is difficult and you adapt yourself to the difficulties of life, then by extension, everything's actually pretty easy. It's like, oh, I've been through this already. I know it's difficult, but I've been through this. I've adapted. I've grown past this. I know how to handle these situations. This is actually quite easy because I'm so exposed to this, because I'm so used to this. Does that make sense? Now let's look at successful Sam over here. Successful Sam is someone who endured a difficult past, so he's able to have a fantastic future. Successful Sam is what I'd call a one percenter. And I say he's a one percenter not because of income, but because most people will just not take this path. Most people, like I said, go down the path of least resistance. Successful Sam is happy with his life. Genuinely. He's genuinely happy. He's not just saying he's happy to put on a front. He's actually happy. He doesn't need to tell you that he's happy. You can just see it in the way he moves, the way he acts, and the way he kind of walks through life. He's healthy. He lives within his financial means and he has positive relationships. He's in control of his life and he has the courage and willpower to live the life he desires, regardless of what society tells him that should be. Like I said, sometimes society tells you to engage in certain behaviors or activities that are detrimental to you as an individual, but great for society as a whole. Successful Sam does not listen. He understands what's in his best interest and does things that benefit him. Of course, not to the detriment of other people around him. But if everyone else around him is telling him to do something like jump off a cliff, he's not going to be one to follow. He's going to just stay on the cliff where he's safe. Does that make sense? He's endured difficulties, which is why his willpower is so high and his outlook on life is so positive. When you go through difficult times, it's easy to see the positives. It's easy to feel like everything's a win. When you do things that are difficult consistently, everything by extension seems easy. This is sort of a key idea that I want to drill into your head by the end of this video. And this is sort of a spoiler too, but through the video, what I'm going to share with you are just 8 steps that I think will help shortcut the process in a good way. Shortcut the process in a good way. But it'll kind of shortcut this process and help you understand some of the lessons I learned to change my life for the better. Do I think everyone needs to go through the hardest path possible? No. If you could get a shortcut and learn certain lessons to make sure that you don't go through the worst possible case scenario, is that beneficial? Sure, absolutely. Now, the whole purpose of this video is so that way you don't end up like mediocre Mike in the grand scheme of things and you become more like successful Sam. Do you need to go through the absolute hardest times to become like successful Sam? No. There's a good expression. It's good to learn from mistakes. It's better to learn from the mistakes of others. And in this video, what I'm sharing with you are my mistakes. They're things that I did poorly and lessons that I learned that you can learn by extension without having to go through the negative circumstances. So again, I want to keep you from being like mediocre Mike, and I want to help you become more like successful Sam. Now, before I get into the actual tactics of this video, who am I and why should you listen to me? Just a brief synopsis of who I am. I'm the former owner of College Conqueror. College Conqueror was a small business I created several years ago, about nearly a decade ago, which helped high school students and college students pretty much succeed in college and life after college. And the reason why I created that business is because I think college doesn't give you, college and high school, but college and high school, they don't give you the best tools or the best insights to truly succeed. They don't teach you things about taxes, how to buy a car, about just general health. All of the things that you should learn, college and school in the grand scheme of things will not teach you, or it's very difficult to learn these things. So College Conqueror was sort of the way to kind of mend that gap in knowledge. I co-founded Affinity, which was a marketing agency. We helped small gyms and personal trainers grow their business with the use of Facebook ads and social media publishing. I published several books over the years. I'm currently happily married. I used to read about 3 to 5 books a week for 3 years straight. I'm the current owner of Productivity Accelerator, which is a business that helps young professionals, young busy professionals, and entrepreneurs get more done in less time without sacrificing their entire day, without sacrificing their entire lives in the process. I've navigated multiple industries successfully, including real estate, law, and the medical industry. I'm the former host of one of the top podcasts in Northern Virginia. I'm the top productivity trainer in Northern Virginia. I'm sought after as a guest for numerous podcasts, and I've been on 10 to 12 shows so far this year. I actually was on a podcast a few weekends ago, and I plan on being on a few more before the end of the year. And my income is significantly higher than the average household family income, not individual income, household family income in America. I'm not rich, full disclosure, I'm not rich, but I'm pretty well off currently, and my income is still growing. So that's just a little bit of a summary about me to kind of hopefully get you to listen to me a little bit more. Now, I want to kind of go back before I give you the steps that you can take to kind of completely turn your life around if your life isn't going as you desire, and how to help you go from mediocre Mike Too Successful Sam, I want to kind of share with you my low point in life. This is kind of the area that I was at that led to me coming up with these 8 steps that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. So, years ago, I went to a college called Penn State University, PSU for short. If you live in America, you probably have heard of it. It's a pretty popular college, university, I should say. It's bigger than a college, but it's pretty popular. If you're outside the US, you might not have heard of it. But one day, I received a letter telling me not to come back. I remember it was like in December. I lived in my own kind of apartment by myself. I had my own room. Well, my own apartment. It was like it's kind of hard to describe. There was an apartment building, but I had my own room and my own unit within the apartment. And I remember getting a letter, and very politely, it kind of said like, "You didn't pay your tuition, or at least enough of your tuition, so don't come back." Um, and this led to me kind of being kicked out of my dorm and being forced to find an apartment to live in. I remember when I got this letter, I was actually kind of in panic mode. And like the month before the school year, or not even a month, like a few weeks before the school year, the semester ended, I'm sorry, about 2 weeks before the semester ended, I was packing up. And I remember I was like super sick. Like I had this like weird fever. And have you ever had one of those fevers where like you just can't really move well? Like it just, it's a struggle to even like walk or get out of bed. I remember I had that fever, and the shitty thing was I had no choice but to like push through it and like move all my furniture back the way it was, you know, get rid of like a bunch of other furniture that I had. I was just like moving my room around. I was super sick. It was awful, brutal. And it was funny because like it was, in a weird way, it was sort of the, I don't know what you want to call it. It was sort of the spark that would lead to this cycle, or this like couple years of just negativity and depression and just me being upset at myself and just at life as a whole. But it wasn't fun is the short clip notes version of that specific experience. So I ended up kind of going home, trying to figure out what to do. I remember I was going back home for the Christmas holiday, fully packed up, and I was looking for an apartment over the Christmas break, and I ended up finding this one place. It was kind of off campus because I didn't want to stay at home. I could have, I guess, hypothetically stayed at home with my parents, but it felt weird to me to stay home, especially at that point. And in my mind, I think at the time too, I didn't really grasp that I wouldn't be going back to college anytime soon. In my mind, I figured, oh, I'd still go back, and then maybe within a month or so, I'll find a way to get back into college, and I'll just restart my classes like mid January and then go from there. That was not the case. I ended up finding this apartment. I was rooming with like 3 other people. They're strangers. The place was about 10 minutes away from campus. And to pay rent, I needed money. So I ended up just working at just random jobs. Whatever was able to hire me, I was working there. And I want to say this: you would think that as a college student, or as someone that was like just in college at a great university, you would think it'd be easy to find like a basic job at like a dollar store or like a gas station or something like that. It was not. I applied to so many jobs, and so many places did not call me back. Now, why they didn't call me back, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea, but most of them did not call me back. And I remember one that I applied to was called Snappy's. You can kind of see in this picture. This is the location I actually worked at um, most of the time, and I'm going to kind of share stories about the specific location very soon. But I remember one day, Snappy's, this store had multiple locations, but this one location called me and they said, "Hey, we saw your resume. If you want a job, we can do an interview." And I was like, "When?" And they were like, "Well, in like an hour." I was like, "What? An hour? There's no way." Like, I'm just kind of like, I'm like putting my resume in other places right now. And they're like, "Well, if you want the job, you can come in like an hour, or if not, we can give it to someone else." So I remember like literally, because by this point I was so far off campus from the location, and I have no car. So it's not like I could just go home and get in my car. I had to walk everywhere. And this Snappy's location was probably about 35 minutes away. And by the time they had called me and told me to be there, not even like an hour, they told me to be there in like 30 minutes. And the place was like 35 minutes away. So I remember just like sprinting, like actually sprinting to the best of my ability, because you can't sprint for like 30 minutes, of course. But I remember like sprinting and like kind of jogging, like all the way across campus and then all the way off campus. And then I was like on these long streets trying to get to this Snappy's location to do this interview. And part of me was like super self conscious because I was so sweaty from the jog. Because it was like it was not summer, it was kind of warm out, like in January. And then, of course, too, when you're running and you have like heavy stuff on, like it just you start to sweat more. It's not a good position to be in to like be in like a coat where it's kind of warm and you've been walking all day, so you're already like your body temperature's already up. Now you're sprinting and running across campus and to like the store. So I get there and they do an interview. It was a super basic interview, super simple, and they gave me like a math test. Of course, I passed it very quickly, but ended up working at Snappy's as my primary job. Applied to Walmart. Walmart kind of gave me this position as a. I think they first hired me as like one of the cash register people, and then they were so short staffed that they offered me a position in like produce and somewhere else. It was produce and I think the bakery section or something. And I took it because they were willing to pay me like I think $11 an hour if I did both positions, like not 11 per position, $11 total to be in all these different positions. But I think their base pay was like $7 or $8 an hour. So I was like, well, that's a lot more money, 11 versus like 7 or 8. So of course I'll do it. And I think at the time Snappy's paid me like 750 to work with them. So really not that much. Combined, I was making like $18 an hour, not full time, not full time. So less than probably about 30K per year if it was an entire year. That's how much I would be making. So I was getting more jobs too. Worked at a movie theater. Movie theater I worked at like 2 or 3 times. First time I worked there, the guy was like, "Oh yeah, you're a great employee. I'll call you back for your second shift." He gave me one more shift, worked, and then he never called me back for my next shift. He was just super disorganized. I don't know if he just didn't like me or if he just was genuinely disorganized. He might have just been disorganized. And I remember he said, "Oh yeah," so he signed all the paperwork. I signed the paperwork, gave my social, all this stuff. And he said, "Okay, the schedule is going to be out next Friday. We send it by email, so be on the lookout for your schedule." Friday came, didn't see the schedule. Called him. I was like, "Hey, am I on the schedule this weekend?" "No, but let me double check that schedule and get back to you." He never got back to me. I remember calling again, like Saturday or something like that. Did not pick up my phone call, and it was so frustrating because I needed the money so bad, and I needed this job, and it was a cool job. It was a movie theater, so it's a simple job. I remember walking to the movie theater to hope that he was in person, and I went to him in person, and I was like, "Hey, you never called me back, and you never sent my schedule. When do I work?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll give you a call back." Never called me back. Never told me I was fired. Never told me that I wasn't hired. Never heard from him again. I just assumed that I just didn't get the job, even though I gave him all the paperwork and he said that I was hired. He never called me. So to this day, I've technically not been fired from this job. He just never called me for my position. Maybe one day he'll call me and say, "Hey, I got a shift open. Do you want to take it?" I don't live there anymore, so I guess I can't. But that was my story with the movie theater. Worked as a freelance writer for this startup called the Revel Report, and that was okay. Didn't really pay anything, but it was okay. And I worked as a dishwasher at this popular Irish pub called Kildare's. That was kind of like my main second job for a while. That job was okay. Paid $11 an hour, which was a lot for me at the time. Again, because my primary job at the gas station was $7.50 an hour. Um, so it became a fantastic job. It was very difficult. Dishwashing to me is one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my entire life, just because you work so consistently without stopping, and it's so gross. It's so uncomfortable. Nothing about it's pleasant at all. But yeah, that was kind of my work experience at that time. And despite working at all these jobs, one of the worst things about working these terrible jobs is that they don't pay anything at all. And there's something frustrating about working different, like multiple jobs at the exact same time and not even having enough money to pay like a $500 a month rent. Because that's kind of what my rent was after we split it, with the other roommates. I think it was like 400 or 500, something like that. Really, which is nothing nowadays. It's really nothing in the grand scheme of things. But when you're getting paid like 750 an hour, not getting full-time shifts. I was not getting full-time shifts. I was probably getting like 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week at one position, at least at first. And then at the gas station, or sorry, the bar, I think I was working maybe 4 days a week from like 6 to 2, something like that, 3 or 4 days a week from 6 to 2. Not even, because maybe like 2 or 3 days a week from 6 to 2. It wasn't that much. So it really isn't that much money. But I was always working and I had no money, nothing to show for it. So it was super depressing. And on top of that, I had no time to like talk to girls, and girls weren't interested in me anyway. I was kind of like chubby at the time, had no charisma, could not speak to girls, could not look them in the eyes. I would get super anxious, super shy, super nervous around them. I always smelled terrible, probably because I smelled like the kitchen, not even like the food. I smelled probably like the dirty dishes of this pub. It was awful. And it's next level depression when you do so much work and you have nothing to show for it. And on top of that, I was at this college town where it should have been easy. It was like Penn State's a known party school for anyone that's not familiar. And it was so difficult for me to even like talk to girls. Like even when a girl seemed like she was remotely attractive or at least attracted to me, the downside was I was so I had such low confidence and such a low self-esteem at this point that I would talk myself out of her being interested in me, if that makes sense. Like in hindsight, I was like, oh, I think she was interested in me. Like nowadays I can say that. But at the time, if she expressed interest, I would think that it's like a prank, or I would think that she's like, messing with me. Or I would just misinterpret it completely and be like, oh, she's just friendly with everybody. It was awful. Um, and it sucked too because you see everyone else at least seem like they're doing so good with girls, and you're the only one that seems, in your mind, you're the only one that's struggling. It just compounds like how negative that all felt. So, and then on top of that too, my diet was horrible. I only ate fast food. I did not cook at all. I shouldn't say I didn't have the money to cook. I did have the money to cook, but I wasn't well versed in finances at the time. So I assumed that Taco Bell and McDonald's were cheaper. Because I remember at the time, Taco Bell had this like special menu where it was like $1 for like, I think like these potato, like soft wrap potato tacos and like plain crunchy shell tacos. They're like $1. So you could get like, at least I could get like a good meal, get like 2 or 3 tacos for $3. You do that a couple of days, a couple meals per day, a couple days per week, and you could live off of Taco Bell for like less than $30 or $40 a week, which is crazy because like if you cook, it's cheaper. But at the time, I didn't think that. Same was true with McDonald's. I remember McDonald's, they had this like spicy chicken and this chicken sandwich. They were like $1 each. McDouble was $1. Fries were like $1 and like 15 cents, something like that. So this is like I literally would estimate like how much food would cost before I went anywhere. Because there were some days where I had like no money, and I was like, I guess I'll fast. I guess I'll fast tonight because I have no money to eat. Or maybe I can find a ramen store where the ramen's like 69 cents. And I talked about in the beginning, when you go through difficult things, it makes other things easier. Like if you do difficult things consistently, then what other people, I'll put it this way. Nowadays, I can fast pretty easily because I had to go through a long period of time where I couldn't eat. So fasting becomes easy when you can't eat. Like when you can't eat and you have to fast, that's hard. When you choose to fast, even though you could eat because you do have food in the fridge, that's easy because now it's a choice. For most people, I see they can't fast. I've seen so many people that can't even fast for like a good couple hours in the morning. Like 2 hours past, they're like complaining and whining because they haven't eaten food. It's because they've had life so easy that they've never had to go that long without food. So they take food for granted because life is easy for them. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. And I'm going to express more about this as we go through this video. It's going to be a long video. So please give me your attention throughout this entire video. But as you can imagine, from the poor diet, being unable to be having any success with girls, having no money in every area, I was struggling. And this is what made me super depressed at the time. And I legitimately thought that this would be my life forever. I remember at one point, I don't know if I have this in this note in this video, but I remember at one point, like I went home to visit my parents, and my mom came and picked me up, and I remember just like crying so much because I was so depressed and I thought that my life was over. And it feels weird to say because if you're listening to this, it might not sound like that big of a deal. Like you might think to yourself, well, you're just like 20 something years old, like early 20s. Of course, this is not your life forever, but it felt that way. It felt that way. And as we're driving at one point, I'm with my mom. We're on the highway, and I start breaking down, like crying in tears. She pulls over to the side. She's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Man, I failed in life. I'm a failure. I got kicked out of school. I'm making like no money. I'm going to be stuck at this gas station and like this bar for the rest of my life because I can't find a way out because I can't make enough money to like really do anything. I don't know what to do. I'm lost." And she tried to comfort me, but I don't think she gave me like any real solutions besides, find a way to get back into college. And she helped me a lot at the time, but there seemed like no path. It didn't seem like there was a real path to doing that. And I think what really made it difficult is that at that time, a lot of the people I worked with were also super negative. I love everyone I worked with, but there were some people that would tell stories about how they didn't go to college and how they started working at like this gas station or at Walmart at the age of like 21 or 22 or 27. And in their 40s and 50s and 60s, they never left. They never left. Their pay never increased. They like there were some people that were like in their late 50s or 60s that were making about $12 an hour. It's like you're barely making more than me, but you're like three times my age. How did this happen? And I really thought I was in my I cannot express this enough. I would think to myself, this is me. I'm gonna be like these people when I'm in my 60s. And I won't be able to afford anything. I won't be able to afford kids. I'll never be able to have a wife. This is like literally the thought that process that I had. Like it sounds ridiculous in hindsight, but when you're living in that experience, this is the thoughts that go through your head. And it's so depressing. It just sets you back so much. Um, and I had seen so many people who would just like do jobs like this and they would never leave. Funny enough, I did a vlog about this. Took my wife to Penn State. If you type in like the rich life, I have a vlog series with my wife, and we went to Penn State and we saw people at Penn State that were still working at Penn State that I saw back when I went to Penn State 10 years ago. They never left. So there are some people that do these jobs and they never leave. Whether it's because they get comfortable, whether it's because they fall into a routine, I do not know, but it happens. And I'm not like shaming them. Some people might like these jobs. Some people might do well off, maybe the money or the pay is good for them at whatever particular job they have. That's fine. But I didn't want to be that way. And I especially didn't want to be like the people that I saw in their 40s and 50s that would, make no money and they were just like always depressed and always unhappy, always struggling, always having like all these problems that were just piling up because they had no money to pay for them and they felt stuck. I didn't want to be that way. Like it legitimately terrified me. So this is kind of the point that I was at this point. And it's funny looking back on it in hindsight, like when I was in college, I didn't value education like at all. Like I think in my mind, my identity was that I was really smart. And I think I was smart. Don't get me wrong. I do think I was smart. I do think I am smart. But at the time I thought I was too smart. And I thought that like classes were too easy because I remember freshman year and sophomore year, a lot of people in my freshman and sophomore classes were like super stressed. They were saying how difficult college was. And I actually found college to be pretty easy when I first got in. So I thought like, oh, I must be smarter than all these people because they're all struggling, getting terrible grades. Meanwhile, I'm in honors. I'm getting like these good grades. I'm getting Dean's List. I didn't study that much. There was one class, like a chemistry class, I didn't study for, and I did bad in that. But otherwise, I didn't really study, and I got good grades at Penn State, which is supposed to be like a semi-difficult school. So, it kind of boosted my ego and it prevented me from really valuing the classroom. And then once I got kicked out, suddenly suddenly education became more valuable. It's kind of like when you lack something, when you have something, you take it for granted. When you have an abundance of something, you take it for granted. When that thing gets pulled away from you, when you suddenly lack it, it's only then that you get to see the value of it. But the problem is that you see the value of it once you no longer have it. So it kind of sucks. You work hard to get back what you once had. That was the situation that I was in. And so I remember at this time, I'm just working. I'm picking up every shift I can because again, I have like no money, so I'm trying to like not be in the negatives. I'm trying to at least be like in the positives to a degree. Literally, like this again. This might sound like not realistic to a lot of people. If I had $100 in my account before my pay period, I was ecstatic. I was happy. That was like being rich to me. I still remember like this is kind of in the future, but I remember at one point I got this job at Halloween City as like a manager. And I remember my first paycheck was like $800. And I was so excited. I was like, I'm fucking rich. Like this is fantastic. 800 bucks. Like I'd make in a month at these other jobs, in a month, I'd make like 600 bucks. And I've already explained to you that my rent was like 400, 500. So I had no money by the end of the month. So if I managed to go to my next paycheck with like $100 still in the bank, or even like 10 or $20 still in the bank, not be in the negatives or not be close to the negatives, I was happy. And then when I got that other job in the future, which I'm probably not going to talk much about it in this video because it's not that relevant. But once I got that other job at the Halloween City, where I was working pretty much full time, and I had a higher income. I think I was making like $15 an hour at that job. So my paychecks were like, I think 700 every 2 weeks ish, something like that. Man, I was excited because that was the first time I had crossed having 4 digits in my account. Like I remember having like 1,100 and something dollars, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! I actually have money in my account." My rent was cheap too at the time because I had a roommate, but my rent was like 300 to 400 still. Super nice. But at this time, when I was working at the gas station and at the bar, I was, picking up tons of shifts. Every time someone wanted to not work, I'd be like, "Hey, give me your shift. I'll work." So all my shifts ended up being from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. because the other college students that did work there, of course, wanted to go out and party. It's Penn State, and they didn't have to work. Like they were still students. I had to work. I had to make money to pay for rent, to pay for my lease. And it was so depressing. I remember one of the most depressing moments, probably of my life. And this is going to sound ridiculous, but to me, it was super depressing. And the part that made it depressing was all the stuff I mentioned earlier. It was all like compounded, and it was almost like shoved in my face in this one moment. If you can kind of see the picture over here, as you can see, like there's huge windows around the store, and you can't see exactly where the cash register is, but it's kind of like obscured by the pump. Kind of like where that red beam is kind of where the cash register is. There's a big window kind of to my right where the cash register is. And I can see students always walking through the parking lot to go to the parties, to go to the clubs. And they'd always have like all these girls with them and always look like they were having so much fun. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I'm one of the biggest losers on the planet. I'm here in college, at least in this college town, because I'm not a student at this point, working my life away, still making no money. And these people are out here having the time of their lives. They're all having so much fun. Where did I go wrong where these people could have so much fun and enjoy their lives so much and seem to have all this extra money where they can go to the bars? Meanwhile, I'm working every single weekend, every night, doing nothing with my life, being unhappy, being miserable, being out of shape, not being able to talk to girls, not having any money, having nothing. And I remember sitting there, and this isn't like it happened like in an instant, but I remember like going to bed and for like the next week or so, just being angry and like asking myself, like, how do I get out of the situation? How do I get out of the situation? How do I get out of the situation? And this questioning is what led me to come up with these solutions that I'm going to share with you in this video. So that was kind of my low point, but it ultimately led me to kind of taking what I sort of 8 steps that I took to change my life. Now, I want to give you a full disclosure. The steps I'm going to present to you, they're going to seem easy because I'm sharing them with you in hindsight. These took me a long time to learn. This was not something where, one day I woke up and just had all these 8 steps. I didn't get all these 8 steps from a single book. I didn't get all these 8 steps from a single video like I'm giving to you. It took me years to kind of figure out these 8 steps and to actually put them into practice and to actually see results from them because there's a lot of trial and error. Even when you think you've stumbled upon something worthwhile, you still got to work out the kinks. You still got to like get the work done. So everything I'm going to share with you is sort of an abridged and simplistic version of what I had to go through. Now, and I want you to understand, everything I'm going to share with you, these 8 steps, this took me at least 5 years to kind of grasp at even a basic level to pull myself out of the situation I was in. And then it took me more years after that to kind of like really dial in and really commit myself to these things that I had learned. So what I ask of you if you're watching this, please do not take anything in this video that I'm sharing with you for granted. Some of it's going to sound super basic and super simple, and that's because it is pretty basic and it is pretty simple. But when you are coming from zero or negatives, this stuff's not simple, this stuff's not basic, and this stuff is not something you can just like snap your fingers and find out. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Like, do not take this stuff for granted. Actually try the things I'm going to share with you. And I say this because I feel like when you actually try the things I'm going to share with you, you're going to realize like how difficult they are. And you're going to realize like very quickly, it's not so much the concept that's important, it's the application that's important. Um, and also, I want to share with you too. This video does not have any quick fixes. Nothing I'm going to share with you is going to be like an overnight hack to your life. There are no overnight hacks in life in general. People will present that there are. People will present that there's like these big shortcuts. I've never seen anyone who is successful really find a true shortcut that has had a long-term positive impact on their lives. Even people who have like rich families or rich parents, it's not a true hack because they still have to give something else up in exchange for this fortune that they've received by default without them having to put any effort. Hopefully that makes sense. So this video is designed to give you a step-by-step framework and pretty much condense 5 to 10 plus years of my life into what I hope will be just a few months or at least a year or so of high quality effort from you without you stumbling around or without you second guessing yourself. Also, one more thing. At the very end of this video, I'm going to give away a prize. You can only get the prize if you stick around until the end of the video. And hopefully by the time you get to the very end of the video, you'll find it very worthwhile. So I'm going to get into the 8 steps right now, starting with step 1. Understand that good and bad do not exist. Now, I think this is a difficult concept to grasp if you're religious or if you grew up in a religious household. In my personal experience, religions tend to view good and bad or justice and evil as dynamic extremes. But from what I've learned, this is just my personal perspective, they're not extremes, but they're simply just ways of looking at circumstances, their perspectives. Basically, good and bad are subjective to the individual, which means they don't really exist. Like there are very few things that I can think of that are objectively good and objectively bad. And to kind of demonstrate this point, there's 2 people in this picture that you can see, person A and person B. Person A is someone that worked for 3 years. Say he earned 5K from his business in that period of time. So he earned 5K total after working for 3 years. So each year he made about 1,000 something. His bank account gets hacked. He gets devastated and he quits entrepreneurship. He had a business. He made 5K after 3 years. Maybe that 3rd year it finally started to work out for him. He gets hacked. He's done. He's out of the game. He's no longer being an entrepreneur. He thinks that whole experience was not worthwhile. He had a bad experience with entrepreneur. Now take person B. Exact same situation. She started a business. She worked hard for 3 years and earned 5K from her business in that period of time. So 5K total over the course of 3 years. Her account also gets hacked. But she sees this as an opportunity to make more money. She realizes that she has the experience to make more because she made 5K. So she has feedback. She has positive feedback. She has made some money. It's a good amount of money. It's not a lot of money if you do the math over 3 years, but it is good money in the sense that she has a business and she created her own income for herself. That's fantastic. And she knows that she has the skill set to repeat the process. So she uses her skill set after being hacked to complete the process. She has a positive mindset about her negative experience. And she ends up making 10K the next month. It took her 3 years to make 5K. It took her 1 month to make an additional 10K because she had a positive viewpoint on her experience. Now, on the surface, person A might think that his experience was bad, but it wasn't bad. It's just his perspective. Person B, she might think her perspective is good. It's not that good. It's just her perspective. They both had the same situation happen to them. They both got hacked after making 5K after 3 months, or after 3 years. Sorry, after 3 years. The difference between person A and person B is how they handled the situation. It's their perspective that made the result good or bad. Person A's result is bad because he lost money and he's done. That's it. He's unhappy. Person B, she got hacked. She made more money. It was good. It's great that she got hacked. Had she not been hacked, maybe she would have kept going at the exact same pace as before. Maybe it would have taken her an additional 3 years to make 5K more. Does that make sense? So I bring up these 2 points because I really want to pound that into your head before I go into the next steps. Good and bad do not exist. They're just a matter of your perspective. You have to kind of reframe what happens to you in your life. Now, step 2, take extreme accountability. Nearly everything that happens to you is the result of a decision that you made. And even when this is not objectively true, I like to believe it's true because I think it provides a sense of control. My personal belief is that if you have control over your life, you can influence your life for the positive. I see a lot of people that do not take accountability in their lives. I see a lot of people that allow things to happen to them. And even though they could hypothetically control their situation, they don't because they're too busy blaming other people for what's happened to them. And to be honest, there are many situations in which other people are 100% responsible. For example, if you're born to a certain family and your family is just completely negative, there's not much you can do about that because you didn't pick your family. Your family was just given to you by birth. But if you feel like you're in control of that situation, if you feel like you can control your family or at least where you live, hypothetically, you can change the outcome of your life. Does that make sense? Like if you don't take accountability, you can't change the outcome of your life. You need to feel like you're in control of your life to change your life. And this kind of builds on all these steps I'm going to share with you, by the way, build on the previous step. So you can only really do this if you perceive your situation as good, no matter what. If you're in a bad situation, don't perceive it as bad. Perceive it as good. Look for the opportunities, and you'll find opportunities, and then you'll be able to find a way out of this negative, bad situation. But that only comes when you take accountability. I tend to find that people who don't take accountability, people who don't take accountability in their lives, can never have a great life because they're really never in control. They could be in control, but they give up control because they don't want to be accountable for their own lives. These people, even if they're given great things, they'll never really keep it since they'll subconsciously view it as someone or something else providing it for them. Again, this is the kind of double-sided, kind of double-edged sword when it comes to accountability. If you take accountability for everything, you're in the driver's seat. It sucks sometimes. It sucks to have bad things happen to you and say, damn, this is my fault. But the good thing is that when good things happen to you, you can also say, this is my fault. I did this. I created this great thing. And if you've created something great once, you can create something great as many times as you'd like. But if you're never willing to take accountability, sure, when bad things happen, you can always point the fingers and say, oh, it's this guy's fault. It's her fault. It's his fault, her fault, whatever. But then when good things happen, you can't say that you're responsible for it either. You can only say, oh, she made this great thing happen for me. He made this great thing happen for me. But then you're always kind of at the mercy of everyone else. This is the downside of this. This is the double-edged sword of taking accountability. I like to think that a hunter who relies on nature to just deliver him food will starve and die. This is not taking accountability. Think of a hunter in the woods. He sits there in a cabin. He's like, oh, well, one day the bear will come dead. He'll roll himself to my front door and he'll cook himself. Do you think that's going to happen? Of course not. He'll die. Hunter who goes out, takes accountability, and goes to find his food will be fed. I came up with this philosophy because back when I had like my severe depression, and I say severe depression as a subjective perspective of my depression. I was never clinically diagnosed, but to me, how I felt and the situation I was in was just very depressing. To a good degree, it prevented me from doing a lot. Like I would wake up some days and just kind of like lay in bed the entire day, not eat, not go to class, not do anything. This is back when my depression went for a few years. So it went for a few years prior to getting kicked out. It got worse when I got kicked out, but it lingered even when I got back into school for a variety of different reasons. But there were some days where I'd wake up and I just didn't want to get out of bed, and I wouldn't, and I would just cut class and just kind of stay in bed all day. And after a while, I kind of sat there and thought to myself, why do I feel so depressed? And the more I thought about it, and the more I took responsibility for my actions, and the more I took accountability, the more answers I received. And I realized that I was 100% responsible for my depression because at the time I was blaming other people. I was blaming my mom. I was blaming the school. I was blaming everyone and everything else except myself. And eventually I was like, I can't keep blaming everyone and everything else. What did I do to get in the situation? How can I improve myself? How can I get out of the situation? And really what I came down to is I had a scholarship for engineering and I gave up the scholarship against my parents' wishes in order to pursue a lifestyle that I thought was best for myself. And I do think that this was a great thing. I think this was a fantastic decision on my part. But regardless, Me making that decision led to me getting kicked out of school because I didn't have the scholarship money, which meant that I couldn't pay my full tuition. And because I couldn't pay my full tuition, the school kicked me out. And because I got kicked out, I got more depressed and I had to take these terrible jobs. But when I took accountability, I realized I'm working a full-time job. I'm doing all this extra stuff. And if I can work two jobs, if I can, be a freelancer, why can't I start to improve myself? Why can't I start to improve my money? Why can't I start to get in better shape? Why can't I get better with girls? And this is me kind of spoiling the rest of this video, but this is the thought process I had. So I took accountability and I realized at that point, my life was a 1,000% in my control. I took accountability and realized that my life was 1,000% in my control. All of the bad things up until this point that had happened to me were completely my fault. But because of that, all of the good things that can happen as a result are also going to be down to me. I got to do it myself, which is fantastic. That's great. That means that I'm in control. I'm in the driver's seat. And that's the place that you want to be in control. So, step 2, take accountability, extreme accountability over everything. Step 3, find the ideal version of yourself. Now, there was one point, and I'm kind of jumping around. This isn't going to be like super linear. I'm going to share with you kind of how I came up with these philosophies and these lessons. But when it came to understanding that I needed to change the version of myself, I was just kicked out of college and I would get kicked out a second time. So I'd kind of gotten back in, but they were about to kick me out again. And I remember when I kind of got back into college, I took education a lot more seriously. So I actually studied super hard. I wanted to get a good GPA. I was really thinking about my future, and I was really thinking about, getting into a better, actually getting into a good job after college. I was really like taking everything super seriously. And up until this point, or at least prior to getting kicked out, I wasn't taking college that seriously. Really, I was in college because I wanted to like date girls and stuff like that. Because I was kind of a nerd in high school, and I was trying to erase that nerdiness in college, but I never really pushed myself to do that because I had no real reason to do that because I was comfortable. I mentioned this earlier in the video. I was with good friends. We play Yu-Gi-Oh, play video games. I still wanted to date girls, but it wasn't like a huge desire at the time. So I had no real need to change who I was. College kind of forced me to reevaluate my life. So ended up taking all these classes, got a bunch of A's. Like I said, I was taking it seriously. And I remember at one point, um, they rejected my classes. And so pretty much what happened, I don't have notes on this kind of in this presentation, but pretty much what happened, I was taking these classes during the summer, and I think I took about 4 classes, and they weren't super difficult to me, but they weren't super easy, especially during the summer because summer is like faster paced. It was like genetics classes and stuff like that, like different science classes that I had to take. And I remember like really taking it seriously. I got A's in all my classes, like almost like a perfect GPA for that summer. And I remember being so upset because when I went to submit sort of my results, my grades, they were telling me that I still owed money. And they were saying that since I still owed money, the grades weren't going to count until my tuition was paid. And then so over a couple months, the tuition was eventually paid. But by this point, it had exceeded the sort of the time period for me to submit these classes. So they weren't counting them. So pretty much what the school said is, hey, you can like do all these documents, you can write all these papers, and you can submit it to like this. I think it was like the bursar's office or the registrar's office or both. And you have to get like this retroactive like course submission thing. I forget the exact term for it. It was just a pain. It was so much paperwork. It was so much walking around and going to all these different people. I had to get kind of these signatures and letters written by these professors that I had, which was difficult because some of the professors were only available in the summer, and then their email, they didn't check their email after the summer. I remember this one professor did not check his email at all. And I remember saying to the school, I was like, hey, I can't get in contact with this guy. I don't have his phone number. His department doesn't seem, he's like a part-time professor only in the summer. I can't get in contact with him. What do you want me to do about this? And they were like, it's not our problem. Um, so long story short, I submitted all these documents to appeal my classes being submitted or not being submitted. And they said pretty much, F you. They said, it's still rejected. None of your classes are going to count. So I did a whole summer's worth of classes, got A's in all of them for nothing. Um, which of course at this point too, my depression, I was feeling better about my life because I felt like I was finally kind of like making progress. I was getting back into school. I was taking classes again. I had started to really appreciate classes, only for them to kind of pull the rug from under me and say, "Hey, guess what? It doesn't matter. Your classes don't mean anything. Go back to being working at the gas station and stuff like that." So it really like made me get depressed again, all over again. And it kind of slapped me in the face because it felt like even when I was trying to do the right thing, the payoff wasn't there. So I really felt behind in life. At this point, too, all of my friends had graduated. Um, a lot of girls I was still trying to talk to weren't talking to me. So it really felt like the universe around me. I say universe, and I know that might sound cheesy, but I thought this at the time. It felt like the universe itself was conspiring against me to get me to fail. I really thought that at the time. And, I kind of mentioned the story about me crying on the side of the highway when my mom was driving me back home. Um, but it was a pretty brutal time. And eventually, I kind of realized like at this point too, I was kind of reading different books, kind of like getting into philosophy. And I sort of saw this quote: "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And I remember thinking to myself that I didn't have to be in this situation. Like the way I perceive myself doesn't have to be how I am forever. Like I realized that I didn't have to be this way forever, and kind of like all of these negative things just piling on top of me, even though I was kind of making some progress. It was kind of like taking one step forward and getting knocked back like three steps. Even though that was happening, it almost made me more angry and more determined to like win in a sense. And I really thought to myself at the time, like, I just need to be in control of everything. Everything. As much as I can be in control of, I need to be in control of this because this is the only way that I can't lose. Or at least if I do lose, it's my fault, which to me felt, again, taking accountability. It felt better to lose and say it was my fault than to lose and feel like it was someone else's um, decision to make me lose. Because, like I said, it felt like the universe was conspiring against me. And to a degree, I was almost so stubborn that I wanted to kind of like push back against the universe and just not lose to even the universe itself. And then so I kind of sat there. This is not like an instant thing. Like I didn't just sit there one day. Sometimes people tell stories where it's like one day I sat in my room and thought this. This is like maybe over the course of like 3 months. I was sitting there thinking to myself about like all of my deficiencies and all the areas where I was weak. And I thought to myself, could I improve in these areas? My answer was yes, because I felt like I was in control of my life. Then the question became, how do I improve in these areas? And this ultimately led to me thinking about identity. I talk about identity a lot in a lot of my videos, but I think a big part of identity is really sitting there and trying to figure out like who's the ideal version of yourself. Who would you be if you could just write on a piece of paper the best possible version of yourself? And this is exactly what I did at one point. I literally sat there. I still do this to this day. I have a notebook actually right here. This is not, this is coincidental. I have a notebook right here, this big fat notebook. I always take notes. And one of the sections of this notepad I wrote out like maybe about a month or two ago was who the ideal version of myself still can be. Like this next ideal version of myself. Who is that person? How do I become that person? And I remember writing things like I said that I was deficient in. I was out of shape. I had like no friends because they had all graduated. So I was kind of alone. And I couldn't talk to girls. So I had no girlfriend. I had no money. I was making a little bit more money at this point, a little bit more, but I still had like almost no money. And I felt like I wasn't super smart. Like I felt like I was smart before initially when I first got into college, but when I got kicked out, it really kind of hit me in my ego. And I kind of thought to myself, if I were so smart, I could get back into college, but clearly the college doesn't want me. So I must not be that smart. That was kind of my reasoning behind all this stuff. So I wanted to be smarter. So these were kind of just, and this is like a short version of my list, but this is kind of like the 5 main areas that I realized I was deficient in. And at the time, one of the movies, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, if I could be an ideal version of myself, who would that be? And the closest person I could think of, because this was a movie I liked a lot, was Eddie Mora from the movie Limitless. And this is kind of him on the right hand side. If you've ever watched that movie, fantastic movie, highly recommended. It is my favorite movie to this day. But he had all of the attributes that I wanted. He was intelligent. He was charismatic. He had status. He had money. There's scenes of, there's some good scenes in the movie where like he goes out to a bar or club by himself and he can just kind of like talk to girls and they're suddenly interested in him. This is the guy that I wanted to be. So in a weird way, I like try to reverse engineer who he was and apply that to my life. But before we even kind of get into that, I share this because for a lot of people, I notice that they don't have an ideal version of themselves. They don't really know who they want to be. They kind of go through life repeating certain actions or repeating certain habits without really thinking about where their habits or where their actions are leading them as far as who they want to become. So, what I recommend you do is in your own life, ask yourself, who do you want to become? And I genuinely recommend pulling out like a notebook or a piece of paper or jotting it down on like your notes on your phone. I think paper is better because I think if you write stuff down, it sticks into your subconscious faster. But no matter what, record who you want to be, like the ideal version of yourself. And I tell people all the time, it can be a fictional character. It can be Eddie Mora from Limitless. It can be your favorite movie star. It can be someone from a cartoon that you've watched or from a comic book or from some fictional book. It can be someone real. Doesn't matter, but pick someone whose life you'd like to emulate, someone you'd like to be like. And this leads me to step 4. You need to believe that you are limitless. Now, this took me about 4.5 years on and off to overcome, but eventually I kind of adopted this mindset that I could achieve anything. And again, me sharing these steps is not linear. This came eventually, this idea of being limitless. But at one point, I was trying to get my life back together and I realized that I had a fixed mindset. This is a long period. This was not like a short period, but this is like maybe years when it comes to time span where I was being very introspective. I was asking questions to myself and trying to find solutions to my questions, answers to my questions. And I realized that I had a fixed mindset. And I kind of realized this because at this point, I was kind of going through a self improvement journey. I was reading a lot more books, trying to look at a lot more educational podcasts, listen to a lot of educational podcasts, I should say, and watch more educational YouTube videos. And I remember reading this book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it's funny because like nowadays her research is like super popular. At this point, at least to my knowledge, she wasn't very popular, and people didn't really know about like this mindset stuff and fixed mindset versus like a fluid mindset. But I remember reading this book and I realized I was like, this person that they're describing with the fixed mindset, this is me. Like, this is me. I was the kind of person that thought that your circumstances, that was it. That is who you are. This is what you'll remain. And this is kind of during that period, like I mentioned earlier, where I was working at the gas station and I was coming into contact with people that started working when they were in their 20s and were still there in their 40s and 50s and 60s. I thought I was one of them. I thought that, I'm here at this gas station. I'm here at this bar. This is all I'll ever be. I'm not that smart. I'm not in good shape. I can't be in good shape. This is who Leonard is. But eventually I realized that wasn't the case. And it took me a few years to kind of gain a core level of confidence to believe that my efforts could lead to something. And I think kind of the difficult part of this is I do see some people, and this was true of myself as well, when you try to engage in something, if you don't see results quickly, you get turned off from it. It's almost like working out. Like if you work out, you have to kind of be somewhat realistic and understand that you're not going to get your dream body in a week or a month or a year or even 5 years, most likely. Chances are it'll take you a long time to get the ideal physique that you want. So you need to focus on the progress rather than the direct end goal. But in order for you to kind of even create progress or to even pursue these goals or pursue these objectives, you kind of need to believe that it's possible in the first place. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because the previous step, find the ideal version of yourself and believe that you're limitless, kind of go hand in hand. I kind of came up with both of these. I kind of at least realized both of these philosophies at the exact same time, more or less. And so sort of around that time, like I mentioned, when I took the classes, they didn't count. I tried to appeal to get the classes to count and they still told me they wouldn't. And I mentioned that the universe felt like the universe was almost like conspiring against me in a weird way. And it's kind of sounds weird to say. I'm kind of glad that happened. I kind of, in a weird, maybe sadistic way, I kind of like that. I currently like that. And I kind of liked that because it makes you feel, it made me feel at least worthy. Like it made me feel like if the universe is going to put this much effort into me to make sure that I can't win, there must be something good at the opposite end of winning, which means it's worth the pursuit. And if anyone's going to go through this pursuit, it's going to be me because I think I can get it done. I know that might sound confusing, but pretty much it kind of gave me like a weird boost of confidence. Again, this did not happen like overnight. This took like months and weeks of me thinking about this. But I kind of, it gave me this mindset of if all of this stuff is going to happen to me, I might as well like keep going and keep pushing through it and just make it work for me no matter what. Um, so this ultimately kind of made me realize that you need to have a limitless mindset. And it's funny because I would repeat this to myself all the time. It sounds so cheesy, but like I would do things like try to achieve my goals or do whatever. And I would say to myself all the time, like, I'm limitless. I'm limitless. I'm unlimited. I have unlimited energy. I still do this to this day, to be honest. Like people will say, like, how do you have so much energy? And I say, I have unlimited energy. I don't run out of energy. I have energy all day, every day. I never run out of energy. And I like to have this belief that anything you want to achieve can be possible because you're limitless. I think a lot of people limit themselves. A lot of people kind of have this weird mindset where they can't get something done. And to me, if you believe you can't get something done, it becomes true. But if you believe you can get something done, not it doesn't mean that it's going to become true immediately. It may never come true, but it at least puts you in a better opportunity to get that thing done because you believe it can be done. Does that make sense? Now, there's one more thing I want to kind of mention when it comes to believing that you're limitless, believing that anything that you desire is possible. This is kind of like my personal takeaway from the movie. I know this hopefully, if you kind of understand what I mean by this, this will help you a lot. For anyone, again, let me just summarize the movie in case you haven't watched it. Pretty much in the movie, there's this guy, Eddie Mora. This is kind of him as he's getting to like his peak self, his better version of himself. But he's pretty much just like loser in his 30s, struggling relationship. He has no money. He has a book deal, but the book seems pretty uninteresting to most people. He's pretty much a loser in life. One day stumbles on this pill called NZT. He takes the pill and it makes him like super smart to the point where he can like crack codes on how to, analyze market trends, and his stock portfolio increases like by 50x. He becomes a millionaire almost overnight. Super charismatic, super intelligent, super rich. He immediately starts getting into better shape, gets better clothing, all this good stuff follows. And I think if you were to take the movie almost literally, you would think that the pill just increases your intelligence. And I think that's what the movie is trying to show you. And I think that's fine. I've watched this movie literally hundreds of times. That's not an exaggeration. I've watched it probably maybe not hundreds, but over 100 times. 100 times. And one thing I believe about this movie, and I've never heard other people kind of talk about this, but my belief is that your belief in something matters more than anything. And kind of the scene that made me realize this was there's a part in the movie where his girlfriend goes back to her place because Eddie has stashed these pills, the NZT pills, at her apartment. He's getting sick. He needs them. And the way for him to recuperate is by ingesting one because it's a drug. And so he's going through withdrawal symptoms. He needs to take one of the pills to get rid of his withdrawal symptoms and to feel better and not die. So she goes back, she gets the pills. And this guy who also wants the pills for his boss is chasing after her. And he's willing to kill her for these pills. At one point, she is kind of like trapped, and she's like terrified because she went to get help from like these other men. The men tried to help her, and this guy who's after her killed these two men to get her so he can get these pills from her. So she's hiding. She calls Eddie on the phone, and she's like, Eddie, I don't know what to do. This guy's trying to kill me. And he says, take one of the pills. If you take one of the pills, you'll know exactly what to do. He's like, that's how the pills work. So she doesn't believe him at first. He's like, just trust me. This is how the pill works. If you take the pill, you'll know what to do. She takes the pills, and like the world around her begins to light up. She starts thinking about all these different solutions, all these different scenarios. She calculates what the best scenario is, and she gets away and she escapes and gives the pill to Eddie, and he gets better. I watched that scene, and it was something interesting about the scene. Because throughout the movie, the pill, people think that the pill makes them smarter. But I think the reality is that the pill makes you believe that anything you do can have a positive outcome. Before taking the pill, she was in a scenario that she thought was inescapable. She thought to herself, this guy's going to kill me. I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do. She took the pill, as Eddie requested. Suddenly, she began to think about different solutions. She began to notice different opportunities around her. And to me, the conclusion I came up with is that the pill doesn't necessarily make you smarter than you are. Because she didn't really get smarter. She didn't do anything that was like super high Q. It made her believe that an outcome that she wanted was possible. And I think this is true in the entire movie. When you watch any character in the movie take the pill, really what it does is it shifts your mindset to believing that an outcome that you want is possible. I know that sounds very simplistic, but I think you need to believe this as well. You need to believe that anything you do, anything you want out of life can be achieved. It is possible. When I was working at the gas station and I believed that I was going to be stuck there until I was in my 40s and 50s, that was the outcome that I thought was guaranteed to happen. And because I thought that was the outcome that was guaranteed to happen, I wasn't taking any steps. I wasn't making any progress towards a different outcome. I was only making progress towards one outcome, the one I didn't want, because I thought it was inevitable. Once I realized I don't have to go down this path, I can, be in my late 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and not work at a gas station. I started to change my life. Even when the universe was conspiring against me, I realized this doesn't need to be my outcome. This universe conspiring against me doesn't need to be the path that I am forced to take. And because I thought that was true, because I thought I was limitless, I started doing other things. And it worked out for me tremendously. But again, this is step 4. You need to believe that you are limitless. You need to believe that the outcomes that you want in life are possible. If you don't believe that, you're not going to put forth the effort to achieve this best case scenario lifestyle. You're only going to achieve the lower case, or the, maybe I won't say worst case scenario, but you'll achieve the things that are more reasonable and more realistic. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So this leads me to step 5. And this step is kind of like the catalyst that led to me really making the biggest improvements in my life overall. Now, this step is what I call constantly build your pillars of eudaimonia. Now, for anyone that's watching this video that has not seen my other videos, I talk about this a lot. This is sort of like the core philosophy of like my brand, of who I am, everything I teach, everything that I think is worthwhile, at least worth knowing. It's eudaimonia. And if you're not familiar with eudaimonia, it's kind of a philosophy from ancient Greek, um, sort of coined by Socrates. And it's a framework on how to live kind of the highest quality life, a fulfilled life, or a flourishing life. And sort of what Socrates suggests, and I think this is completely true, is the way to build a fulfilled lifestyle is by constantly focusing on health, wealth, and relationships. All three. And you need to be in constant pursuit of these 3 pillars. Pillars is what I call them, because I think it's a easier way to kind of conceptualize this idea as a whole. Um, by seeing yourself as constantly building like these pillars, kind of like to the sky, and each of these pillars are health, wealth, relationships. That's kind of the way I visualize it. I think it helps. But this is what he recommends all humans should do if they want to live a successful life. And I agree completely. Now, one thing when it comes to building these pillars of eudaimonia that I have come across, I think this is super helpful, is the idea of having infinite goals. And I came up with this idea of infinite goals because I would kind of watch these interviews and watch videos and read stories about these celebrities or successful people or rich people. And a lot of them, when they get exactly what they want in life, they start to get depressed. And some of them go and take maybe a bad route. They unalive themselves. They kind of lead a life of degeneracy or debauchery, and they end up almost kind of sacrificing themselves to the drugs they take or the different activities that they engage in that are not great for their health, mental health, and physical health. Uh, in either case, they ultimately destroy who they are. And I think the reason behind this is because a lot of these people don't truly have infinite goals. Maybe they had a handful of goals, or maybe they had a few goals, or maybe a decent amount of goals. But once they get to a certain point, And I think this point is where they've made so much money that their goals no longer seem to have true meaning, or they don't seem that difficult to achieve. This is where they start to kind of go down a negative pathway. Um, I once saw a podcast with this celebrity not too long ago, maybe about a year or two ago. And he was saying that at this point, his life is a black hole because he has so much money that most things in life no longer have meaning. And he was saying that when he had no money, if he went to a nice restaurant, the food at that restaurant tasted great, or the experience of going to a nice restaurant was amazing. Before he had a lot of money, the idea of driving like a sports car or a nice fancy luxury car meant a lot. But now that he has so much money that he could easily buy any sports car he wants or any luxury vehicle he wants, these things no longer have meaning to them. So he's reached a point where any goal he could have had loses its value because he has so much money that these goals are easily achievable. Now, what I think, and I've seen lots of celebrities and lots of people kind of say similar things. What I think you should do is have actual goals that last you, I say 5 lifetimes. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they need to be enough. You need to have so many goals that you know you cannot achieve them in one lifetime. And they need to be big goals. They need to be the kind of goals that you can't just buy your way to succeeding. Does that make sense? They need to be goals that you actually have to put forth effort into succeeding in. So being one of the best snowboarders, that could be a goal you can't buy your way into because you need to actually put forth work and effort to be great at this skill. One of my goals on my infinite goals list is learning Portuguese, learning Spanish, like really being fluent in these languages, learning German, kind of relearning Japanese, Chinese. You can't buy your way to learning these things. Sure, you can buy technology that can translate these things for you, but that's not my goal. My goal is not just to translate these things. My goal is to learn these things, which requires effort. And it's not going to be easy to do. It's going to require a significant amount of time, but that's okay. And there's, for me, infinite languages to learn. So in already just one category, there's infinite goals that I could have in the categories of just learning languages. I think you should apply this logic to every aspect of your life. When it comes to health, have infinite goals for your health pillar. There's always a way to improve your health. There's always a way that you can get better health that extends outside of just paying for something. Financial goals. Sure, making money is a financial goal, but there should be more goals outside of just making more money. Some of the financial goals could be investing a lot of money. Some of the goals could be giving away money to good charities. Some of the goals could be creating and running your own charity. It's just a brief example, but hopefully you understand what I mean by this. I think by having endless, infinite goals, you set yourself up to giving your life significant purpose. And I think having purpose in life is what ultimately drives us as humans. But I think people look towards other things to get purpose, when in reality, you need to give yourself the purpose. You need to find purpose in life on your own. You can't wait for other people to give you purpose. The purpose needs to be decided or determined by you. And this is where the infinite goals list comes in. And I think in a weird way, this is what makes people happy. I think the unhappiest people are the people that have no real goals or objectives. They just kind of meander and wander and ghost through life. So, of course, the way to counteract this is by having endless goals in life. That way you can't meander. That way you can't wander in life. I think there's an expression, and I might be misquoting this expression, but I think it's something along the lines of idle hands are the devil's work. And I'm not sure what the traditional interpretation of that expression is. My interpretation is that when you sit around all day doing nothing, that only leads to negative outcomes. When you have nothing to do, only bad things can come from that. You need work to do. You need goals to chase. You need ambitions that you wish to achieve. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, I don't want to say that I came across all of this intentionally, specifically the idea of eudaimonia. I actually came across this by mistake. As I've mentioned, there was a long period of my life where things weren't going well for me. And as I've also mentioned, I went on kind of like a quest of sorts to get answers to the questions I had. And one of the things I did is I kind of would go to a library a lot in my free time. And I would either take out books and read them at this gas station that I worked at, or when I worked at a bar, I'd read them kind of in between. when I had at least a little bit of free time. I didn't really have much free time at the bar, but when I had some free time, I would try to read a few pages during my lunch break. Um, but I would make time to go to the library and read a decent amount. And one of the philosophy books I came across talked about this idea of eudaimonia, and it's funny because like once I heard this, I realized like how much I was deficient in this area, and how much everyone was deficient in this area of achieving eudaimonia. And I realized like instantly, like most people I knew weren't really successful in any of those categories. Most people I knew weren't in good shape. Most people I knew didn't have a lot of money. Most people I knew didn't have high quality relationships, both platonic and sexually. Like, sure, there's people in college that dated and hooked up, whatever, but these weren't good quality relationships. These were like flings, or these were just like meaningless relationships. So they weren't quality relationships. And it dawned on me like this isn't complicated. This is actually relatively simple, but this concept hasn't dawned on most people. And because it hasn't dawned on most people, because they're not made aware of it, how can you fix it? How can you fix a problem that you don't even know you have? This is kind of what I realized. So once I kind of like learned about this, and I wish I could remember the exact book I was reading, but I think it was I know it was an old philosophy book. I think it was The Death of Socrates, something like that, something along those lines. But regardless, once I came across this philosophy, it kind of changed everything about my life because it gave me a framework that I could use to get better as a whole. It made me realize, oh, you know what? I should work on my health. I should get in better shape. I should work on my social skills. I should work on my communication abilities. I should work on my abilities to talk to girls because at the time that was valuable to me. I should work on my finances. I should learn more about budgeting, about finances, about taxes, about all these things. So I started to go down that path, and me pursuing these three pillars are kind of the next three steps that I want to share with you. Each pillar is its own step because I think each pillar is super worth pursuing. So step 6, build your health pillar. Now, for all of these pillars, what I recommend you do is I recommend you find someone to emulate. This person can be real or this person can be fictional, but find someone that is kind of excelling in this pillar and just emulate what they do. Because I feel like when you emulate what someone successful does, you achieve the results of that successful person, or at least you get close. So, for example, in the health pillar, I emulated Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. He might have different genetics. He's a different height than me. He might put forth more effort. He might care about this goal of bodybuilding more than I do. But if I can at least do half of the stuff he does, or at least even like a portion of the things he does, it'll still put me significantly further ahead than where I was at the time and where I am now, to be honest. I mean, unless you're at the same level as Arnold Schwarzenegger, emulating him cannot be detrimental. And this is exactly what I did. I kind of focused on a workout routine. Him and Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson at the time, I was also emulating. I would kind of wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning because Dwayne Johnson did it, and I would work out first thing in the morning, fasted. I did it fasted because Arnold Schwarzenegger, I read that he would work out fasted in the morning when he was young and when he lived with his parents. So that's exactly what I did. Now, when it comes to building your health pillar, this is what I recommend based on my experience and based on what I think will help a general audience, which is who I assume is watching this video. If you're a dude, there's a lot of fitness advice out there. There's a lot of stuff out there that I think is a bit wacky or it won't help you achieve your goal that much. But personally, what I think you should do, focus on your upper body primarily. Focus on legs minimally if you're a guy. I know people roast guys that don't do legs. I'm not saying don't do legs. I'm just saying don't be obsessed with training legs. And the reason why I say this is because in my 10 plus years of lifting, in my years of helping other people lift weights and get in better shape, in my years of my own trials and errors of getting in shape, no one cares about your legs besides other lifters. They really don't. Legs are a bit overrated. Unless you're training to be a bodybuilder in which the aesthetics of your leg matter, unless you're trying to get the attention of other guys that also lift at the gym, in which in that case the size of your legs probably do matter, No one cares. Girls do not care for the most part. Other men that aren't bodybuilders or lifters, they do not care for the most part. Most people really do not care about the size of your legs, but what people do care about is the V taper, and this is subconscious. People aren't looking at it to, look at the symmetry and the details of your physique, but it's subconscious because a V taper makes you look more masculine, makes you look stronger. If you have a certain shoulder to hip ratio, it makes you look bigger than you might actually be, which is why I recommend focusing on those things. Because to me, it's sort of like that Pareto principle. If you've ever heard of that, it's also the 80-20 principle. Basically, you're finding the 20% of work that leads to 80% of results. This is that 80-20. Put 20% of your efforts, or I should say, put 80% of your efforts into, actually, think about it this way. You only need to put a little bit of effort into training your upper body to get most of the results when it comes to how other people perceive you, which is probably outside of the general health benefits, a good reason why you're lifting. It's probably the reason why a lot of people do lift because they want to be perceived better. So this is what I recommend. Now, if you're a girl, I kind of recommend the opposite. Don't worry too much about upper body. Focus primarily on the lower body. Focus on the butt. Of course, if you're a girl, you know, this probably goes without saying. If you have a nicer butt, more people are going to give you more attention. More people are going to kind of admire that about you. It's better for you. So focus on that. Focus on legs. Focus on arms more so, and focus on back mainly for the thickness, but not the width. Again, this is all my personal experience and my personal take on this. If you're a girl with a thicker back, it looks healthier, but it doesn't necessarily look good to be a girl with a big V taper with like wide lats. I think we can all, for the most part, agree on this. Maintain a low body fat and model your looks on who you admire and who you want to emulate. Not everyone wants to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that's completely fine. Some people like to look more like, say, Chris Hemsworth from the Marvel movies, or maybe, I forget his name, the one guy from the kind of recent James Bond movies, Daniel Craig, I think his name is. There's different physiques that you can emulate. Find one that you like the most and just do what you can do to look as close to that person as possible. Another thing to consider, you do not need a gym. A lot of people will tell you that you need a gym. A lot of people will tell you that you need fancy equipment. You need none of that. You can achieve a very good physique with just your body weight. Maybe a pull-up bar. They're pretty cheap to find. You can hang them over your door frame for like $20, but you don't need much to get in good shape, or at least to look like you're in good shape. This is kind of like the foundation to me of building your health pillar. There's, again, infinite routes you can take to build your health pillar, but I think looking a certain way is probably the first thing you want to do if you're trying to build your health pillar. And of course, with all this, consistency and a decent diet are kind of the main things that make up most of the long-term results. If you're not consistent, you can have the best form, you can have the best routine, but if you're doing it like once in a while, you're not going to make any progress, and it doesn't matter. If your diet isn't at least decent, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's no perfect diet, but if your diet isn't at least decent, if you're not getting at least some protein or enough carbs, if you're eating only sugar or only garbage or only like high processed foods, you're probably not going to get the best results. Um, and I always tell people, I think this pillar is the foundation of all the others. I think if you manage to build a good physique and build up your health pillar, you'll see a trickle down effect to the other pillars I'm going to mention in just a second. So that's step 6, build your health pillar. Now, step 7, build your money pillar. I mentioned this already a few times, but I modeled Eddie Mora when it comes to the money pillar. What you should focus on is living below your means and investing. And when I say investing, I just want to make this clear. I don't mean investing in things like the stock market. I don't mean investing in things like bonds. I don't mean investing in things like real estate. I mean putting your money into things that will allow you to see a return on your overall quality of life. And when it comes to increasing the quality of your life, the thing you should be investing in the most, in my opinion, is you, yourself. Learn more things, read more books, take more courses, invest in clothing that fits you well. I'm not saying go out and buy a bunch of luxury clothing. I'm not saying that at all. That's stupid. Don't do that. I am recommending buy at least 1 or 2 nice suits. Buy some nice fitting clothing. Buy some high quality clothing that fits you well. High quality clothing can be found at Target or Walmart. Like, there's good quality clothing there. it needs to fit you well and it needs to look well because it's a matter of how people perceive you, and how people perceive you determines the overall outcome of your life. People don't like to believe this is true, but this is the case. So invest primarily in yourself. And my belief is that once you make a certain income, then you start investing in things like real estate. Then you start investing in things like bonds, stocks, ETFs, all that stuff. But that stuff comes later. First, invest in yourself. One thing I like to tell people: stop saving money. And I know that sounds counter to what a lot of these financial gurus and a lot of people teach, but my personal philosophy, and this is something I've found to be true in my own life, is that if you're young, most of your money should go to high risk activities that can produce more income or at the very least provide valuable experiences. I say this because you're only going to be young once. The older you get, the more difficult it is to be risky with money, the more difficult it is to take on a risk. So if you're young and you take on a risk, that's good because you're getting experiences. If you're old and taking on risks, that's bad because if you have a family, you're putting your family at risk. Um, it might be harder to recover from any downsides that happen. I'll say in my own life, when I was younger and kind of up until very recently, I would spend pretty much all of my money. Pretty much all of it I would spend. I would spend it on courses, I would spend it on marketing, I would spend it on ads for myself. Whatever I thought could produce a better ROI, I would spend money on. And the reason why I did this is because my thought process was if I ever went into significant debt, and I have gone into significant debt, I could always just recover by the time I'm 30. And I have recovered by the time I'm 30. The philosophy that I had came true. However, if I was, say, 40 and I did the exact same risks while I had a family, I could risk getting my entire family evicted. I could risk my entire family hating me. I could risk my hypothetical children not wanting to talk to me. I could risk the pretty much the course of my entire family's life going down the drain if I took on too much risk. When you're by yourself, though, you can take on a lot of risks because it only affects you, hopefully. When you have a family, you can't do that as much. And it's easier to get away with stuff when you're young. If you're in your 20s living off of ramen and a bad diet, like I did, it's easier to recover from that from a health perspective. When you're in your 40s and 50s, it's harder to recover from a bad diet because you already have so many other potential health risks catching up to you. So, the kind of moral of the story: risks are easier and better when you're young, which is why you shouldn't be just saving money when you're young. Some people think they'll save their way to wealth or save their way to being rich. This isn't true. You can't save your way to true wealth or to true riches. You can only increase your income to get wealthy and to get rich, or invest it. Investing is a form of spending. That's not saving. Investing is spending. So you can't save your way to getting rich or to getting wealthy. You need to understand how money operates, which only comes from spending it. And if you're too afraid to ever spend your money, you're never going to learn the lessons about how to spend money. Um, the analogy I like to make is like a general. If you're a general and you're too afraid to use your army, or if you're too afraid to train them, then your army eventually is going to get destroyed when danger comes. And this is kind of the whole moral of this entire video. When the danger comes, you need to be prepared. When times are hard, you need to be prepared. If you don't know how to spend money, inflation, life, bad circumstances, money mismanagement, all these things are going to destroy you. So the only way for you to overcome this is by not being afraid to spend money and spending your money. I'm not saying waste it, but I am saying that you need to spend it. You need to get into the habit of learning how money works, and you can only do this by spending it. And this is the final thing I want to share with you, at least about the money pillar. And this is kind of like my personal take. This is something I've kind of learned as a real estate consultant, as a real estate advisor, and as a real estate agent, and as someone who has kind of had multiple businesses and has kind of gone too near bankruptcy, gotten out of it, gone into significant debt, gotten out of it, had bad credit card debt, gotten out of it. As someone who's gone through these things, and I think I understand money a little bit better than the average person, even the average financial person that claims to know a lot about money, this is what I recommend. Don't focus on trying to buy real estate. Everyone says to buy real estate, and I'm a real estate consultant, and I'm suggesting to you, don't focus on it. If you want something that gives you more money, has a lower barrier to entry, gives you better tax write-offs, and allows control, and I think that control is always what you want out of life, a business is far better than real estate, because real estate is good for, in my opinion, taking money that you already have and sheltering it and letting it grow slowly that way. If you want to grow money faster, if you want more money down the line, a business is what'll get you to that outcome. If you look at a lot of the richest people, they have businesses. There's a quote that says most millionaires were created with real estate. That is not true. That is a false statement. It's a statement that people keep repeating without knowing the origin of. It's not true. Most millionaires were not created with real estate. Most millionaires in the modern era were created with businesses. So stop trying to always invest in real estate and start creating businesses. Businesses are cheaper to get into for the most part. They're more sustainable. They actually provide you with a real skill because real estate doesn't always provide you with a skill. If you buy a house, it might cash flow a few bucks, but if you lose a house, you got to start from scratch and buy a new house with money that you save up. You didn't really learn a skill. You just learned how to buy something, which you know how to do probably. If you ever bought like a car, it's the same general concept. It's not that much more complicated. So again, a business in the grand scheme of things, if you really want a lot more money, is the best first step. And the second step after you've made enough money with the business, if you choose to go down that route, is with real estate. I think this is difficult to dispute. Even if you try to go the real estate route, understand that real estate, you buy a house, your passive income, one isn't passive. Two, at best will get you about 200 bucks, 300 bucks, maybe less nowadays with today's market per month. You would need to buy about 10 houses to see at least a decent return, to at least have some decent cash flow coming in. As far as like, so it affects your lifestyle. By the time you've gotten 10 houses, 5 to 10 houses or more, that's a business anyway. Because now you need to hire other people like contractors, you need to hire people like property managers, all that stuff. I'm not going to go super deep into the weeds on this. But by the time you buy enough houses anyway, it's a business. So no matter what you do, you're going to have a business to make a lot of money. So you might as well just make a business that's easy to get into and is low investment up front. Because even if you fail, you've at least learned a skill. And it's better to fail while you're young. Again, like I said, take risk while you're young, then try it when you're older. So if you're watching this video right now and you're relatively young, start a business today if you don't already have one. If you're older and you're watching this video, start a business today if you don't already have one, because you're not going to get any younger. Does that make sense? So that's step 7, build your money pillar. This is kind of just like my starting steps to building this pillar. Step number 8, build your social pillar. Now, on the right-hand side over here, this is Hank Moody from Californication. When I was trying to build my social pillar, this is who I emulated. My first takeaway, become more sociable. In my personal experience, the people you know are arguably far more valuable than any money you have, as people can open back doors. And I say this because I think a lot of people really underestimate social currency. Like, social currency will get you more out of life, in my personal opinion, than money will. Because some people don't care about your money. But if people like you, people are more inclined to do things for you. Like, not everyone can be bought, at least not with a normal amount of money. But if people just like you, they're more inclined to do things for you. It's like, if you're a dude watching this, think about a pretty girl that you've probably known. How inclined were you to do things for a pretty girl despite her giving you nothing in return? You probably were very inclined to do things because you liked her. Now, maybe she wasn't a good person. Maybe she's a good person. Who knows? But you liked her, which increased the chances of, maybe you liked her, which increased the chances of you doing things for her. The same is true in all human interactions, whether that's male to male, female to female, male to female. It doesn't matter. If you're likable, people are more inclined to do things for you. And the more people you know, or the more people that know you, the more you can kind of create a net overall positive benefit for yourself by having more people that know you, which means more people are going to do stuff for you. Hopefully you get the point that I'm trying to make. Kind of a quick example of this. When I lived at Penn State and when I first moved to Northern Virginia, one of my goals when I was trying to build my social pillar, like actively build it, it was to meet a lot of people at bars and clubs. When I was at Penn State, I went through a period where I was kind of going out a lot, drinking a lot. I think I mentioned in this video or a different video that you don't want to wander in life and you don't want to have no goals because it leads to degenerate behavior. And at this point, I was kind of slacking off on my goals. I didn't really have any like big goals outside of just making more money. But at the time, I was just kind of working as a writer and making money at like the gas station that I worked at. And I think actually at this point, I had just quit the gas station and I was working as a manager at a Halloween city. So I had extra money coming in, at least relatively extra money for that time based on my expenses. And so I was just going out and I was just drinking, um, basically just wasting time, like not being productive at all. And I ended up meeting a lot of people at bars and clubs just by extension of going out to drink a lot. And it wasn't until later on that I kind of made an active endeavor to not drink as much, but also still meet people at bars and clubs because I still like bars and clubs. They're fun. But one thing I learned is that it's good to meet a lot of people in different environments. At the bars and clubs where I knew a lot of people, I realized that if the cover was high and if the bar or club was full, or if the line was long, people would still let you in. If you knew the right people, they would still let you in. I call it like getting backdoor access. Like if you know people, you can get backdoor access to things. Um, there was one story. I don't think I have it in this video, but I'll share it with you. I remember there was one time I was. It was right when I graduated at Penn State, actually, and a friend of mine came to visit. My friend Leon came to visit, and oddly enough, I didn't expect the bars to be crowded, but they were pretty crowded. And this one bar I liked a lot had this huge line that was all the way down the street. And I knew just from personal experience of like that bar when the line was long that it would probably take us like 1 or 2 hours to get in. And it might not even be worth it. Like if you wait that long, is it really worth it? I don't know. I don't think so. And just luckily, I had a friend named Evan. My friend Evan, or I'm sorry, Derek. My friend Derek was there in the front of the line, and he didn't work at the bar. I've had experiences where I knew people who worked at the bar, and they would let me in. But my friend Derek was at the front of the line, and he saw me walk by, and he's like, "Hey," like he he wasn't super like overt about it, but he was like kind of motioning me to like say hi, so he can like sneak me to the front. Sneaks me to the front, sneaks my friend to the front, and we skip the whole line, save ourselves like 2 hours, get in, have a good time. I think I knew one of the bartenders there too. He gave me my friend free drinks. It was awesome. The reason why I tell the story is because it's an example of me getting backdoor access based on people I know. Does that make sense? Like, sure, maybe I could have paid to get in, paid like the door guy to get in and cut the line, but that'd be what, 30, 40, $50. I got in for free. I saved myself lots of time because I just knew someone who happened to be there at the front of the line that just let me go in with him. And this, I'm saying this in a bar and club context, but this doesn't just apply to a bar and club. This applies to life in general. This is true even of careers or jobs. One of the sad realities I learned about careers and jobs after I graduated is that most jobs, I think about statistically about 74%, something along those lines, of people that have long term careers got their long term careers through connections in that company. Does that make sense? So you're better off rather than sit there and try to like perfect your resume. The better strategy is just to know people in the company because you'll get to the front of the line. You'll get backdoor access. When everyone's submitting resumes on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, ZipRecruiter.com, whatever website there is, when they're all submitting their resumes and all getting rejected by the AI or whatever, if you just knew the boss or if you knew a manager or if you knew the recruiter or if you knew someone in HR, they can just say to whoever does the hiring, hey, my friend Lenny is applying, or this guy Lenny's applying. He's very good. He has all the credentials. He's super great. They'll probably let you in. They might not even need an interview. It's backdoor access. So I say this because I think building the social pillar is super underrated, but people don't understand that the more people you know and the better your connections and relationships, the more back doors you can get into. And that is more valuable than money. Like if you were trying to get a job in a pinch and you knew people, that's more valuable than you trying to pay people to get you a job. Because even if you pay certain people to get you a job, there's no guarantee they can let you in. There's no guarantee if you know someone they'll let you in, but at least you didn't pay anything. And you might have a better reputation coming in. It's just a better overall outcome. Again, this doesn't just apply to getting a job. This doesn't just apply to getting into bars or clubs. This applies to everything in life as a whole. The better your connections, the better you are overall. Um, so that's kind of what I recommend when it comes to building your social pillar from a more platonic perspective. I also think from a dating perspective, people don't put in enough time to build up their social pillar. I think whether or not you're a guy or a girl, I think dating more and taking more time to learn about the opposite sex is beneficial to you in the grand scheme of things. And I say this, abandon any beliefs you have about the opposite sex. if you're a woman watching this, whatever your female friends have told you about men or whatever you think you understand about men, abandon that. Learn about men from the ground up. If you're a man watching this, whatever you think you've learned from about females or women from your male friends or from the other men that you know, abandon it. Consider them wrong. Learn about women from the ground up. This is the best way, in my personal opinion, to learn about the opposite sex because it gives you a very unbiased view about them. And it makes you actually put forth the effort to learn, to challenge your notions. This is how you get to learn about the opposite sex. This is the best way, in my opinion. Now, as far as meeting new people, because that's something I've seen a lot. People say, well, I want to be more social, but I don't know how to be more social. I don't know how to strike up a conversation. I I'm not going to give too much in this video because I don't want this video to be longer than it already is, and it's already a pretty long video. But this is kind of just one of my strategies. One of the best techniques I personally recommend and that I have used and continue to use to meet someone new is compliment them on something unique that they're wearing. And the key word is unique that they're wearing. When I say unique, it needs to be something that you know that person actively put effort into putting on. So if it's a shirt that has a cool design, that is unique. If it's earrings, chances are it's unique. If it's a certain style of shoes, chances are it's unique. A watch, unique. Style of shirt, unique. Haircut, unique. Specific tattoos, unique. Don't be generic. I've seen some people be generic and say, oh, I like your tattoos. That's generic. Compliment something specific about the tattoos. If there's a certain design, if there's a certain meaning, compliment that. Does that make sense? It shows attentiveness, and because it's unique to the individual, it gets them to perk up and it shows that you're paying attention to them. Now, this is not easy to do at first. For some people, it might be. I think for a lot of people, it's not going to be that easy. It sounds easy on paper, but if I challenged you right now, wherever you are, to go up to someone, a random stranger on the street, and compliment them on something that they're wearing in a split second, because remember, in real life, you can't sit there and just like analyze people from top to bottom. You have to be like, you get like maybe half a second to compliment somebody if you interact with them. This is not easy, but the more you do it and the more you practice this, the more it really puts you in a mindset of just always seeing people as a seeing like the bigger picture of people and always kind of like looking at these little details, these little nuances. Like when I see people nowadays, I always notice their shoes. I always notice the types of jeans or pants they're wearing or dress. I always notice that they're wearing like a different coat. I even notice when people get a haircut. If I know them well enough, if I see them frequently enough, I can even tell when they get a haircut. I see these things because I've practiced so much looking for little details that are unique to the individual. So you can tell when something's been changed. Does that make sense? Get into that habit too. Highly recommend it. It's an easy way to meet people. Quick story, actually. Just the other day, not like super recently, but maybe about a few months ago, I was at a bar with some friends. We were playing pool, and this guy had on Chelsea boots. And for anyone that's not familiar with Chelsea boots, they're kind of like these usually tan slide-on boots. They have no laces. I wear them all the time. And this guy had Chelsea boots. So whenever I see someone with Chelsea boots, I like to compliment them and say like, "Oh, you have good taste in shoes," because it's kind of funny, and it's a good way for me to bond because I see their shoes, they like the compliment. They see my shoes, so they know that I'm not full of shit, and they know I mean it, and then we bond on it. And so I did that to this one guy. He had Chelsea boots. We're bonding, and we hung out, exchanged Instagrams. He was a cool guy. Um, but it's a good way to meet people because very few people dislike compliments. Now, some people might not be receptive to the compliments. Don't take it personally. Some people just aren't used to getting compliments. Some people have low self esteem, so they might not interpret the compliment well. But no one dislikes compliments. So give compliments more often. Um, And kind of one final story about this, because I think it's just funny. A few years ago, because I say this because even though I know about this technique, it still works on me just as well, even when I know someone's doing it to me. A few years ago, I was in Barnes and Nobles, and I was at the like the business section of Barnes and Nobles, and this guy comes up to me and he's like, "Oh, dude, nice shoes," and I was like, "Oh, thanks, man, I appreciate it." And he's kind of like talking to me, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I like that shirt too," because I was wearing like, and this is an idea of unique. I was wearing a white long sleeve t-shirt, but it was kind of like a Henley, like a button up, one of those shirts that have like three buttons at the top. And while it's not like a super crazy design, you don't see a lot of people wearing them. So it's still technically unique despite it being just a more or less a t-shirt. And so he says to me, he's like, "Oh, that's a cool shirt too." He's like, "Do you work out?" So we're talking back and forth. He's giving me compliments. And I knew in my mind, I was like, I know he's like setting me up for something. But it's hard to deny a compliment. You can't be mad at someone who's giving you a compliment. And so eventually I found out that he was like a network marketer, which I'm not really about. I'm not a network marketer. I don't like it. I tried it years ago. It's not for me. Nothing against it. It's just not for me. But we're still friends to this day. You know, he's a really cool guy. We became friends. And I always laugh because even as he was doing this, I realized what he was doing. He was kind of complimenting me to kind of build rapport. And that was a good way for him to start the interaction without me kind of like, pushing him away. Because a lot of people, if you just kind of go up and say like hi, they're like, oh, it's kind of off putting. I don't know what to say. I'm not used to this. And they'll kind of like push you away or find reasons to leave the interaction. This is a good way to get around that. So, even when I know about it and even when I can spot it being used on me, it still works very effectively. So that's kind of why I share that story. So that is step 8, build your social pillar. Trust me when I say that your social pillar, your relationship pillar is probably the most valuable pillar out of all three to build. As far as financially in the grand scheme of things, at least health is the most important. But having a good social life is fantastic. And then the final one is sort of a bonus. The bonus step 9, construct an identity for yourself. Now, earlier I talked about finding an ideal version of yourself. And this is the idea of just kind of writing out the things you want to be. Step 9 is actually creating that identity for yourself. Now, I may have said this earlier, but in order for your life to change, I may have said this before, but in order for your life to change, your identity needs to change because your identity is the governor of your actions. It is human nature to act in accordance with how you view yourself. So if you see yourself as a clown, for example, you'll try to tell more jokes. If you see yourself as an athlete, you'll exercise more. If you see yourself as fat, you'll eat more, or you'll be less inclined to do athletic activities. If you see yourself as a criminal, you'll commit more crimes. And this last one I bring up because in college, the final major I ended up with was criminology. And in criminology, we were taught about this concept called labeling theory. And pretty much in labeling theory, there's sort of a belief that people act in accordance to the label placed on them by society. So if society sees you as a criminal, even if you have done no criminal activities, you eventually begin to perceive yourself as a criminal because society says you are. And once you perceive yourself as a criminal, it's far easier for you to engage in criminal behaviors because that's what criminals do. They do criminal behaviors. And if people think of me as a criminal, then what's stopping me from acting like a criminal? Like they already see me as a criminal, so why not? If it's beneficial to me to steal stuff, why not steal stuff? Um, but the reason why I bring this up is because there's sort of this underlying idea that it's harmful to label people criminals without sort of a true reason to do so. Like if they haven't engaged in criminal behaviors, calling them a criminal is dangerous to everybody because it effectively creates more criminals. Does that make sense? Because if you label someone a criminal without them engaging in criminal behaviors, then they'll work to remain consistent with the identity placed on them by society, and they eventually become a criminal. And then they actually, the label that was placed on them becomes true. Now, I bring this up because this is true not only for criminals, this is true for you and me. It's true for everybody. But it doesn't have to be with criminal behaviors. If society saw you as wealthy, you'd probably begin to act wealthier and you might actually get wealthy because you're doing wealthy people things. Does that make sense? If there were magic glasses, and even if you were overweight, for example, and people saw you as skinny and in shape and ripped, you would act in accordance with the label that society has placed on you. So you'd act athletic and you'd start to do things that athletic people do. You'd hang around with athletic people because that's how you're labeled. That's your new identity. That's what people consider you to be. And so in order for you to act in accordance with that identity, you surround yourself with that group of people, which means if you're around that group of people, you're acting like those people. Does that make sense? So you want to construct an identity for yourself that is successful. And I know in these previous examples I mentioned that society is kind of placing a label on you. While external labeling is powerful, it's good to understand that you can internally label yourself. You don't have to kind of follow what society labels you as. I think most people, kind of going back to the beginning with mediocre Mike and successful Sam, mediocre Mike allows the labels of other people to influence his life. Successful Sam is influenced by how he perceives himself. He's not bound to the label that society places on him. You need to be successful Sam, and you need to label yourself the type of person that creates the life that they want for themselves. Basically, success. You need to label yourself as successful. So, this is kind of what I came to learn over the years. And when it came to me recreating my identity, what I came to learn is that it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking, which is a new identity. It's easier to do that than it is to think your way into a new way of acting. Does that make sense? It's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking and a new identity than think your way into a new way of acting. Because the more you engage in a certain behavior, the more it becomes a habit. And once you start to have certain habits, your habits will automatically create certain outcomes. And so, what can you do to easily create a new identity? This is what I recommend. There's lots of things that I think work well, but the simplest thing and the easiest thing that I recommend people do is wear new clothing. It sounds super basic, it sounds super simple, and it is kind of simple, but simply changing the way you dress will ultimately determine how you behave. Think about it this way: if you're someone who is more reserved, you probably wear more reserved clothing. You might wear things like a polo, maybe khakis, maybe just some nice shoes, whatever. People will label you as reserved. People might see you as more conservative. If you want to break free from that label, if you want to see yourself and have other people see you as maybe more outgoing, maybe if you're a dude, you want to come off as the bad boy, think about what the bad boy dresses like. You probably have seen this. He might have tattoos. He might wear a leather jacket. He might just wear like basic clothing, maybe a headband. Who knows? But by you acting that way, other people will perceive you that way, and you'll perceive yourself that way. And so it creates like a positive feedback loop. Does that make sense? Same thing with, like, say, for example, a police officer. If, say, for example, you weren't a police officer, but you wore a police uniform, now that'd be illegal. But say a lot of people start treating you like a police officer, you might begin to act like an actual police officer. Now, you won't be one technically because you aren't certified to be one, but the power dynamic of being a police officer might stick with you. And so you might believe that you have more authority than you may actually have. And it's all because you just dressed like a police officer. It creates a positive feedback loop. So the simplest way of changing your identity is simply just changing your outfit to the thing that you want to become. And it feels weird at first. It's going to feel unnatural, but the more you do it, the more natural it's going to feel. I did this back in the past, like in literally like years ago when I was in college. I was super conservative, kind of nerdy, um, really shy, and I wanted to break out of that shell. I didn't want to feel shy. I didn't want to be super conservative. And actually, a roommate of mine kind of helped me with this. I remember one day I was at a party and I had like this shirt and it was super buttoned up because I was super conservative. And he was like, bro, he's like, unbutton those top buttons. And he unbuttoned them, and like he unbuttoned them like down to here. And he was like, real G's don't button up all their buttons. And you know, it's kind of funny, but it's a good lesson. It's a good lesson. If you want to behave or be perceived a certain way, you need to dress that way first. That's the simplest way, at least. So I say this because think about someone who you want to emulate in life. Dress like them. Go to Walmart, go to Target, go to some clothing store that's cheap, even go to Goodwill if you don't have a lot of money, and just buy clothing that resembles what that person would wear. And then over time, you'll start to act like that person or that group of people. If you want to be more athletic, wear sweatpants, wear like, gym outfits more. You'll probably start going to the gym more. You're not going to find a reason to just wear gym clothing and just be around the house all day. You'll probably at least be somewhat motivated to go to the gym because you're wearing the uniform of someone who goes to the gym. If you want to be wealthier, try wearing suits more. A lot of people, I'm not saying that wearing a suit makes you rich automatically, but if you were wearing formal clothing more often, you'd find a way to justify wearing that clothing. So you might engage in behaviors that someone wearing that clothing would engage in, i.e., someone that's wealthy or someone that's rich, or at least how you what you perceive as being rich or wealthy. So I don't want to like dig too much on this, but I think it's a super powerful tactic that does not get talked about enough and very few people use. And of course, too, join groups and hang out with these people that you want to be like. Um, I think that's also super beneficial and super simple to do. As humans, we tend to learn, in my personal opinion, through osmosis. So again, if you're someone who's overweight and you want to get in better shape, hang. If you want to be, if you're someone who's overweight and you want to get in better shape, hang out with people that are in better shape, and you'll start to adapt. You'll start to adopt the habits of that group of people, and ultimately, you'll start to be more like that group of people. You'll start to get in better shape. Um, so I kind of just want to leave you with this final step. The reason why I left this for last is because I think if you have a good identity for yourself, this is kind of similar to believing that you're limitless, but this is a more, I think, tangible route of believing you're limitless. Because, for example, right now, if you just sat there and said to yourself, I'm limitless, I have unlimited skill, I have unlimited energy, all that stuff. If you don't have the proof to back it up, it's difficult to believe it's true. This is a more tangible way to go about it. If you see yourself as that kind of person, then it's easier for your subconscious to accept that you being unlimited or you having unlimited whatever is true. So this is why I included it last, because I think if you start with this and kind of reverse everything else, I believe that if you start with this and work on constructing an identity for success, whatever success may be for you, first, all of the other steps I mentioned are significantly easier. And doing this is what will separate you from being, it'll keep you from being mediocre Mike versus successful Sam, if that makes sense. So I know this was a long video. Hopefully you stuck around until the end. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a bonus that I want to give you, and hopefully this benefits you a lot. So everything I mentioned, like I said, took me about 5 to 10 years overall to kind of really grasp and to kind of really figure out. I want to help you get everything done in like a week to the best of my ability. Some things are easier than others, but I want to give you shortcuts, good shortcuts, not bad shortcuts, but good shortcuts that'll help you skip over the negative stuff while keeping the positives and while making sure that your life is ultimately easier in the grand scheme of things. So I made this program called the Better Life Blueprint. Pretty much it goes through everything I mentioned in this video and a lot more. I go through the exact step-by-step process to get a better physique, how to get in much better shape, how to have the perfect diet, how to lose body fat, how to get, which supplements are the best. I talk about in the Wealthy Lifestyle Blueprint, how to invest in real estate, how to buy your first property, how to understand credit, how to budget, how to manage your finances better. In the Social Lifestyle Blueprint, I talk about how to approach people easier, far more simply, how to build a better social circle, how to do things like throw parties more, all that stuff. I talk about all this, and I have one more course in there. It's super short, but it talks about identity and the exact step-by-step process you can engage in to rebuild your identity from the ground up in a way that's better for you overall. Now, usually I sell this entire bundle for $497. I'm not going to do that for you because, like I said, I want to give you a gift for making it to the very end of this program. So if you go to the link below, it should be the very first link in the description below, and use the code LIFESTYLE, you're going to get everything for free, 100% for free. There's going to be nothing you have to pay for. Don't worry about your credit card. Leave it at home. It's all going to be free. You'll get all the stuff, and there's going to be some extra bonuses that I haven't mentioned here, but they're going to be very beneficial and supplemental to you achieving the goals you want. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. Please leave a comment below if you did. Please like the video, and please share this video with someone else that might get a lot of value with this. But yeah, click the link below if you do want this program for free. And I hope to see you in the next video. Peace out. Bye.